We're all involved with community building, right? This is part of our lives, whether we like it or not at times. The question I think I'm interested in, hopefully you are as well, is how do we do it effectively? Whether the purpose is to grow a business or to reach a new audience or to solve a social problem or to stay sane right now, which is kind of what we're doing this morning, right? Connecting with like-minded people. I thought I would start with a quote from you know, a dude that you're probably aware of. He's called Seth Godin, and he wrote a book called Tribes, which is like a micro Bible for this topic. You don't have to go and read this book, because I actually saw a blog post yesterday of someone written the 50 highlights or most important quotes from this book. But it is a good one. It's guided so many people. Give us a shout if that includes you on like how to go about doing what we're doing. Oh look, there's a wave down there. So but this is his quote of his definition of what a tribe is, which I think is really relevant to our conversation this morning. A tribe is a group of people connected to one another, like us right now. Connected to a leader. Kelly's going to give us a wave. I'm just temporarily taking on the leadership for a few minutes. And connected to an idea. What's our idea here? Our idea is like, how do we go about building these things effectively? For millions of years, human beings have been part of one tribe or another. A group needs only two things to be a tribe: a shared interest and a way to communicate, which is often started and facilitated by a leader. When Seth wrote this, he probably wasn't thinking of Zoom, but there we go. Here we all are. So that's a good starting point. So all communities, all tribes, all groups of people come together usually start because someone asks an interesting question or tries to solve an interesting problem. So I wanted to ask you about interesting questions. Here's a couple that I've had in the last year or so of my life. Daddy, why doesn't the sea fall off the world? When I was watching the sunset on the beach with my 5-year-old daughter, why doesn't it fall off the world? It sounds like I can hear like a fax machine going, which can't be true because it's 2020. But
somebody need to mute, perhaps. Maybe
if someone is also operating, you know, a full-on factory, congratulations in this time. But yeah, if you could quiet that down, that'd be amazing. Why doesn't the sea fall off the world? How do you go about answering that question quickly? And then also, almost this is what I love about children, is they'll switch topics like dramatically quickly. And you'll have to be ready for the next question. When a baby has two dads, where does she get her milk? So children are particularly good at asking honest, direct questions, which often, you know, really require a simple, straight answer. But sometimes it's like, what? How do I answer that question?
I had two of those yesterday, Ben.
You had that question?
No, not that exact question, but I had, can I hear through my eyes, and how do I see kindness? I had those two yesterday.
I tell you what, your children are next level. They should just host, they should facilitate these sessions.
I think we should get kids hosting webinars.
It reminds me a bit of actually one of the examples of a good community building, which is Paul Linley, who started Ella's Kitchen. If you remember the organic baby food products, and one of his first products was he was trying to figure out how to solve the problem of, you know, bad baby food, orange mush, shocking advertising around it, and the whole health of the industry. And he was trying to get that, like, how do I communicate this like healthy organic food product in this little pouch in a compelling way? And so he asked his daughter, what should we call this? And she was like, oh, it's Daddy, that's the red one. And then like, okay, that's the red one. And then that kind of set up a whole genre of marketing around like saying exactly what it is, like the innocent. And
yeah.
But it's really interesting. Children do cut through a lot of crap. So yeah, those good questions. So it's always worth reflecting. What's the best question you've ever been asked? Was it you've been proposed to? Is it? And try to answer. What's the best question that you've asked yourself that's led to interesting things? Think of sliding doors. Think of engineering serendipity in your life. Think of trying to step out and doing something different. I think Georgie is in this group this morning, and Georgie runs something called, oh, there she is. I can even see Georgie. Georgie runs something called Trigger Conversation. Maybe she can share a little bit about this before the session's over, which is all about asking like compelling, interesting questions and cutting through the small talk. And when I got married, we decided that a lot of people hadn't met between our families and social networks. So what we did is that we mixed everyone up for dinner, And on the table settings in front of each other, we would put a little opposite you note. And in that opposite you was a bizarre, interesting, quirky, embarrassing fact about the person you were sat opposite. And what it did was it just cut out the small talk. So they went straight into, oh, I hear you had a special operation once, or whatever it was, tell me more. So yeah, always thinking about what questions will trigger interesting conversation. I'm basically selling trigger conversations here, Georgie. Okay, so here are a couple of questions that I've asked have led to interesting community building projects in my life. Could we build a sustainable community on a remote island? Hands up if you ask yourself that question. Maybe not that one, but you probably thought about escaping somewhere and living differently, new lives in the wild, escape to the country. There is a whole genre of television shows built around that. There's a whole load of dystopian novels. There's a whole load of all sorts of things on this. And so this was something when I was sort of coming out of uni, I was like, how can I go on a big adventure, go and live on an island, but also how can we do a better version of volunteer tourism? What does community tourism mean? So this was in the sort of early 2000s. And hands up, Audrey, you're not gonna be able to answer this question. But hands up if anyone else ever had a MySpace account, a MSN Messenger. Audrey, you did? Oh my God, you started early.
Audrey, were you alive then?
Early adopter. So yeah, this was in the era of, like, you know, MySpace was the big social network. The Arctic Monkeys had just proven that you could basically not have a big production company behind you, and you could still go to #1 in many countries around the world with your first single. And this was the sort of point in the music industry where people were like, oh wow, you don't need to have a big backer in order to get famous or get out there in the world. And so, like many industries, they music led, and others followed in terms of innovation. And the question that me and a guy I met on my MSN Messenger were asking is, like, could you build an ecotourism project with an online community supporting it, crowdfunding it, even though we didn't call it that at the time. So we went looking for islands. This is always fun to Google. If you have time online at the internet at home in your lives, which maybe you do at this point, islands for sale is quite a fun one. You think it's going to be full of millionaires and super yachts, and it is, but there's also, like, actually a bunch of islands up for lease and sale around the world. So if you're bored, go and explore those and you love islands. And we found this place in Fiji. This is Vorovoro Island. Has anyone here in the group this morning, that's what I always like to ask, been to Vorovoro or came there when we were running the project? It's a small, you know, there's 3,000 people in the world who've been there, so it's a small chance. But sometimes I always go, yeah, I was there. We sat on the beach there 10 years ago. So this is where I lived for 5 years, and our idea was, Bora Bora, Kate, that's not far away. That's not far away. We're in the same country. So yeah, we were looking for this, like, kind of island, and we found this place. And the local community, you can just see the houses there, the 3 little houses. It's about 10 kilometers off the coast in northern Fiji. And the local community had been foretold by their gardener, the guy that came and did the farming with them, that one day the world was going to come to Vorovoro. It was like this sort of story in their community. And so when my friend and I arrived with our backpacks and said, oh, we want to connect people around the world with something called the internet, on the internet, which they didn't know much about at that stage. And we want to use the story of this island to bring them here, to bring investment into developing this ecotourism project, support, create jobs, and then tell the story of you as a traditional island community in the South Pacific culture. They were like, ah, yes, this story is true. And so what was interesting is we were both sides were asking questions. We were asking this sort of question from a kind of social network enterprise point of view, and the local community were asking it from a story of their land and their people's point of view. And then we just came together because we both were curious about what might happen. And although our motivations were slightly different at the start, they were aligned, and we built this project together. So that was exciting, and also ridiculously ambitious. But when you're 25 and you're not, you know, tied to your house or anything else, children, it's a good thing to try out. This is where we live. So this was the village. One of the biggest challenges was, like, communication. This is true so much in our lives now, but even when both sides are talking the same written language or spoken language, English, a Fijian Fijians speak fantastic English. It doesn't always mean you're saying the same thing. So you're like, someone will say yes, but it doesn't mean they're saying yes. And so this is something we have to learn in community building, is like how we communicate. Okay, it says we're speaking the same thing. And this is why emojis have been so powerful, because it's an expression of feeling that we're not necessarily very good at writing in short sentences. We need sort of a volume to express ourselves clearly and meaningfully. So that was a big learning, is cross-cultural communication, how you build things online, offline, different business models around supporting community and so on. We ended up spending more money building our online tribe than our like actual physical village. So the water tanks, the little buildings we made, the solar electricity, all of that cost less than actually building our own bespoke social network online, because this was sort of pre-Facebook. And so we built these tools like chat rooms and voting booths and all this sort of stuff, profiles, and all from scratch, which cost a lot of money. And then about a year later, Facebook came along and our online community moved to Facebook, and we were like, oh, we have a very empty online island. Expensive. So the big learning there for us was like, in terms of community building online, is like, go where the conversation is rather than trying to build something from scratch, which hopefully that lesson has been learned now. So yeah, and there was my first business partner or local business partner, Tween Marley, 65-year-old Fijian chief. So I think another thing with community building, learning from this project, was that your partners or your collaborators or the people that you build community with aren't necessarily the ones that look and sound and like you. And in fact, you can learn much more. So as long as your purpose is aligned and you can see the clear benefits and how you're going to do this, then often a diverse partnership can work really effectively. So here are a couple of other examples of projects that I've been involved with. What if we could turn underprivileged talent into role models? So this is a question that a good friend of mine asked when he was sort of 20 years old, out playing football in West Africa, because his own professional UK football career had ended through injury. So he'd gone traveling, he was teaching English, playing football, saw the talent, the unbelievable talent these young Ghanaian boys had, and he started a little charity supporting them, education and football training. And 20 years later, they're now the best football academy in Africa. And that's ahead of like the big sponsored academies through corporates like Red Bull and football clubs as well. So they're called Right to Dream. They've won every under 15 championship in the world. They have the best African girls academy as well. They also support a lot of disability sports, and their real focus is on character development and education alongside football talent. So he's playing this like long-term project around how do you build a new generation of leaders through sport that can help others lead. So sometimes community building is like this huge vision where you say, what if we could take a 10-year-old and in 20 years time, they could potentially be thinking about being a business or political or sporting leader in their country? What might our model look like? And then going back to, starting from there. So community building can be like, how can we start this thing small? It can also be, how can we do something that's really world changing? But when you decide to do something like that, the really big ambitious stuff, the thing that you have to take on board is like the commitment. I'm going to commit to this, because if you don't commit to it, others won't follow. So you've got to plant your flag, and you don't know where you're going to go in the middle bit, but at the start, like, I'm going here and the vision is here. So you've got to be really committed. What if we could walk on water? We've all asked this question, right? If you run really fast down the beach, you can do it for about half a second. So this was a community. There we are, walking on water. So this is in northern Holland, in the Netherlands, in Friesland. It's been so long since I've been there. Anyway, this is a really cool community started by some Dutch guys called Think, and I'm actually joining a webinar with them later this afternoon. THNK.org, and they started it's a leadership school, but around the idea of creativity being the magic element in leadership that's missing or not emphasized enough. in terms of solving societal problems. So this was their first class. I was part of their first class. This is the kind of business school I'd always dreamt of going off. We went off and we did cool trips around the Netherlands, and then lots of stuff with, you know, collaborating with like Pixar and artificial intelligence professors and all kinds of cool people thinking about how do we bring creativity into the modern world. So if you get these opportunities, you've got to say yes to them. And the way they formed the community there was taking us out and doing like almost like an old school, a sort of team bonding thing, walking across at low tide to this island. Why are we all here? We all believe the same things, because it was a really diverse international community. There we go, celebrating Queen's Day in Amsterdam, which I recommend to everyone post lockdown to go and take part in those celebrations. They're amazing parties on boats in Amsterdam. What if we could help people love Mondays? Now, quite a few of you here, I think, have been part of this community. So who's going to guess it quickly before I reveal it? Which tribe has been trying to solve this problem? ETC, John is there. Oh, John, you just beat Natalie and Renata by like 5 seconds. There were quick buzzers in this group. So yeah, Escape the City. This was started by two guys after the crash in 2008. They were like, come on, what's our work really about? Our corporate jobs. So I think there's a lot of people in this position right now. And they said they went to look for the organization that would help them transition away from corporate lives into doing something more meaningful, more creative, more socially impactful, more adventurous. And they couldn't find that community. So they started Escape the City, which was an events group to start with, and then grew into an exciting jobs board, and then grew into a school, which I was part of for a few years. And it's just really about saying, come on, there's more to life than the secure desk job. And I think it's interesting when crises happen, how communities form to actually, like, you know, it sort of speeds things up. We're seeing a lot of things speed up right now. So bureaucracy is being slashed in like the health care industry because people need to solve the crisis. And a lot of innovations and changes are happening faster. Some of them aren't great, but a lot of them are really positive. So we're seeing this in careers as well, and helping people change careers and move quicker is going to be an important thing as business models have to adapt as we go through this recession. And the cool thing about what we learned at Escape was that the trade-off that you make between doing sort of something more fulfilling, more impactful, more creative, more aligned to who you are as a person, you assume is going to be, I'm going to earn a lot less. But actually the reality is not necessarily that people are earning the same, but their perception of financial security is the same before and after they escape. So maybe they're earning less, maybe they're earning differently, but their relationship with money is still secure or about the same as it was before. So there isn't really a trade-off, but it's hard. This journey is hard, and this makes it simple. But that was something we learned by talking to 2,000 people at Escape the City. And Pip, who you probably know was one of our earliest escapees, if you've ever had nut butters, I'm sure there's some people who have a brand crush in this community on Pip and Nut, executed brilliantly. So this was a little competition we ran at Escape called Escape to the Shed, which was like a tiny little shed in our tiny little garden in Battersea. And we said, whoever pitches the best idea of what they would do from their shed for 3 months to save money on rent wins the competition. And Pip won it, and she launched Pip and Nut off the back of it, just by having that focus. So what that proves is, one, is creative competitions in communities or projects are really effective, and two, it shows that if you give people like a focused space and say an accountability, they will make their venture happen, or they'll give it a really good focus, they'll speed it up. Final question about a project led to an interesting project. This is my focus now, is what if we could actually finish books? So the Japanese call this sondoku, the growing pile of books, like basically your curiosity in real life on your Kindle, on your bookshelves, but like your curiosity winning out over your ability to consume the information. We've all seen all these bookshelves appear on news channels recently, like, yeah, I know all this. And it's like, have you really read it? Are you really using those things? Are you using what you've learned up there to try and make a difference in your life, in the world? So that's what we've been doing with Rebel Book Club for the last few years, is trying to take books that we're interested in and, one, finish them, rather than giving up after 2 chapters, because non-fiction is harder to get through than fiction. It's not like Normal People, where there's a sex scene every 3 minutes. And then also we're trying to like say, what can we learn from this? What can we put back into life in a positive way? So that's what we've been doing at Rebel Book Club, and it's been a lot of fun. We had meetups regularly in London with cocktails. We've had to change that, but we're now getting really engaged online events. We're using a cool platform called Hop-In, which I'd really recommend for those that are looking to build bigger events online or more events with more variety and so on. What's the reason for having only non-fiction? Because it's harder. Like typically fiction is easier to get through by yourself, and also non-fiction tends to be more, not always, but often more about learning. So it's like, and that's easier to do together. So it's accountability plus learning and everything else. So, oh yeah, we collaborated with this guy. This guy's got 2 mentions this morning. What's going on? So what do we need to build a tribe? So then now moving on to some tips and strategy, which hopefully can be useful for you guys and what you're doing. And I'd love to hear any more. So share anything that you've done that's been effective. So trust is central, right? Trust is central to all of this. Trust is central to most things, but it's especially important when it comes to community. And a book recommendation is Rachel Botsman's book on Who Do You Trust? Rachel Botsman, based in Oxford. Really good just to follow online anyway. She's, lots of good TED Talks on this sort of stuff. But trust is a confident relationship with the unknown, which is kind of like really important right now. It is what really makes the world go round. But it's evolved quite a lot. Not necessarily in the last, although it's speeded up in the last few months, but not necessarily in the last few years, but certainly in our lifetimes, all our lifetimes. So trust used to be local. If we go back to the idea of a tribe, 150 people, don't go over there, lots of tigers. Don't go over there, big cliff. Whatever it is, it's like this is the trust, 150 people, and that's still true in like physical groups. Like trying to know more than 150 people well is hard. So that's the kind of local trust. Then it moved into institutional trust. So we had nation states, we had organized religion, we had something called corporations, brands, the media, the mass media, whatever you want to call it, banks. Big idea of like, trust us, we'll get this done. But then something shifted. That institutional trust started to break down in different ways, or is breaking down, and we've moved into a more distributed version of trust. Technology has played a massive part in this, globalization, all these things. But also through that and our learning of how different parts of the world work or don't work, we've then gone like, well, I trust this network. So I trust the White Bear community to help me learn some of these things and make useful connections. I trust Rebel Book Club to help improve my reading habits. So it's trust in brands, and there's a whole conversation to be had about that, right? But the thing that's important for community building is to know that trust has to be the center of it, and it's evolved. So how do we respond to that? So here's a list of communities, for want of a better word, or leaders or trust builders, and they've all been quite effective at building trust, building tribes. But some of them you would say, oh, they're fantastic, and some of them you might say in our liberal bubbles, you might say, oh, they're awful. So I just put them in a list from top to bottom here of things that I think are really exciting, tribe building projects, and ones that maybe are much more divisive and problems. So this is interesting to see, like, it's not just being used, these tactics aren't just being used for positive ends, but also maybe to cause division and all sorts of other nasty things. So it's interesting to reflect how these tools can be, like any tool, can be used positively and negatively. Now, this statistic shows how things can change very quickly, because it's changed again in the last 2 months, but co-working was becoming a really big thing. And a space was opening every few hours and growing really fast a year or 2 ago. And now, of course, that's changed again because we've all gone remote, but then we might see that flip again as we go back into the world and not into set offices, but more co-working might even grow even more off the back of this crisis. But it's interesting how much people feel like they need that connection in order to grow their projects and their tribes and their communities. So what's a good business model for building trust if this is so important? Well, loyalty and quality and transparency seem to be the 3 key things. So if you can get a good mix of that, which isn't always easy straight away, but you can start with transparency, and you can promise low things, keep your promises fairly low, and then deliver well to, as you go. And then that trust tends to evolve. And I'll share a couple more tactics around that in a second. This trust can be distributed, so it can be spread out like we see with those sharing economy models, with communities that are spread out around the world. But the purpose is always like, this is what we do. Think of parkrun. Like, we help people go running regularly who might not normally go running regularly. And there's no judgment about whether you run fast or slow or whatever. You just turn up and run. That doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter who you are, you know that you're going to be part of it. On the flip side, in that kind of world, Tough Mudder, this is about a team not racing, doing a challenge together. And it worked really well as a business for a few years. I think they've had a problem recently. But this is what leads to a happy tribe. If you can get that trust embedded early on and the purpose is clear, you still have to figure out the business model and the other bits, which we'll come on to. But you essentially have the core, like, okay, we're happy with this. It's a solid foundation. So here's a brilliant brand. Now, I was lucky to chat to the founder of SoFar, Rafe Offer, the other day. And their world has changed, right? In February, they had 5,000 gigs in 200 cities. In March, they didn't. Their shop closed. Luckily, they raised a bunch of money. They're on the sort of third round. You know, it's they're decent scale so far. Songs from Another Room is what that stands for. I can work out for a while, but it's all about those intimate gigs in Airbnb for music. But because what Rafe was saying was that actually the fact that they've built so far around a community of artists, supporting artists, getting their names out there, marketing artists, bringing people together, building fan bases, a bit like a real world MySpace or up-to-date MySpace. They've actually got such a strong community that when things went badly wrong for them a few weeks ago, the community has come around these artists. They've set up a fund to support them. They're now doing online gigs. They're trying to pivot business models, and they will come back. They will survive this so far. And it's pretty much down to the community. If they were just a marketplace for gigs, just a ticketing for like small gigs, they probably wouldn't survive. But the community has been the differentiation here. The challenge, of course, is like building that community over the last 5-10 years for them has been a lot of work. So it's all very well saying, oh yeah, so the community is the thing we need to do. Let's tick that box. It also comes with like, that's a massive project. It's a challenging project as well. But community-based brands will be surviving longer than non-community-based brands at the moment. Here's another example of a really interesting little project that's growing fast, especially right now. So we met Deepak at Escape the City when he was just starting this wonky produce delivery service, and Deepak and his wife Emily would just go to the local market, grab the fruit and veg, and then a wonky fruit and veg that wasn't being sold, go to the local restaurant, sell it on, and it was like, it wasn't scalable, but they did it for a year. Then they've just started to grow it, and they're now doing 30,000 boxes a week. It's mad. They've just like quadrupled in the last few weeks, and they already had funding on board. But the point is that they built that trust base slowly over a few years. They knew, and as the conversation around food waste increased, they were like, oh, there's the odd box, those guys have been doing this, rather than pivoting to something like that. So it's they, you know, building that trust takes time, but then when something happens like this situation and the demand for food delivery has gone through the roof, they're in this position where they can scale their business and impact as a result. Who remembers these guys? I think they're still going, the Adventurists. How can we drive to Ulaanbaatar in a 1-litre engine car, crap car, and have a real adventure? So it's about taking risks, raise loads of money for Cool Earth, great charity, rainforest charity. And their whole brand and community is built on like not being, life shouldn't be boring. And like there's so many adventure companies that are quite sterile, like they talk about adventure, but are they really adventurous? Whereas the Adventurists were literally like, no, this is a risk, and they've got a significant death waiver. And there've been some big accidents on their trips, but thousands of people have had amazing life-changing experiences, and they've been a great fundraising machine. So brilliant community building through wild adventures. I think coming back to like a more boring type company or industry, you've got like what gets more boring than utilities like electricity, but Bulb Energy have like landed and said, we're going to help people through their own social networks share green energy, and get financial kickbacks. So it's quite a basic model, but they've just been really clear, really simple, and made the user journey and trust as a result fantastic. Can they take that to real scale? We will see, but they've got off to a flyer. And then in terms of clear social impact, there's this fantastic charity which was started by Alex Stephanie, who formerly ran Just Park, the park sharing app. So he comes from that kind of tech background, but he wanted to play a part in trying to solve the homeless crisis. And so he said, well, what is it? What is the underlying problem here? Is like people need help getting their jobs back. So how do we help them? Well, we crowdfund to get people reskilled, retrained back in the workplace. Started with one person. And now they've got a really effective crowdfunding model for reskilling homeless people. And the community building around each of those individual kind of campaigns. That's why crowdfunding is so fascinating, is because it's like you're jumping on board, like we want to back this horse, we want to support it. Whether we get the sort of return on investment through the gift, or whether it's a good feeling, or whether it's an investment in a company that might do well. That's why crowdfunding is such a good community builder. Because we get this, there's all sorts of interesting rewards. So there's a few examples. I've already talked about the brilliant Ella's Kitchen. And then of course, there's this amazing movement called the B Corporation, which is around putting purpose, like auditing purpose in business. So hopefully lots of companies will be B Corps in the future, and we won't even need a label anymore to see that they've got clear purpose and branding and so on. So how do you build a tribe? So just really quickly for a few minutes, then happy to answer any more questions. This is what you need. Well, first of all, think about why now's a good time to think about it, especially now. But yeah, 14th of May 2020, interesting time. Surely this is a bad time to start something. Well, I would argue, and I'm sure many other people would, that this is maybe the best day ever to start something. Yes. Kelly's nodding. No, Kelly, you got to focus on what you're doing. No, we ought to start something, help people, make a difference. So why is that? Drop in the chat. Why is today the best day in history to start something? Tell me quickly. There's no right or wrong answer here. But who thinks, maybe you strongly disagree with this, but why might today be a really good day? Anyone got any ideas? Come on. I'm not moving on until you give me an answer. It's the first day. Manny. Is that both your first and second name? That's brilliant. It's like Neville. It's the first day of the rest of our lives. Excellent. People want to connect. Yes, they do, Audrey, you're right. So there's two things going on here. One is all the cliches. First day of the rest of our lives, starting is the hardest part. That's true, Nat. Carpe diem, seizing the moment, getting out the front door, whatever metaphor you want to use. No one in history who's ever built something has sat at home and just played with ideas. They've actually begun. They've invited people to join. They've started something. So there's that. There's an old cliche that you've got to just start. And if you carry on talking, it's never going to happen. The second reason, in terms of the context of today, is that we are in uncharted territory. Absolutely right, Kelly. And the world is reframed. Yeah, so exactly that. But the combination of the backdrop of the technology and the fact that it's the toolkit to start something, especially online, is cheap, effectively free. Those tools have been globalized, no code tools. You know, launching a tribe online like this today, we can all do it. Plus the fact that the need has shifted significantly. So think about all the pain points that exist even now compared to 2 months ago. And I'm not just talking about healthcare, I'm talking, mental health, jobs, environmental issues, creativity needs, like all these things that we need in life. Education has just shifted significantly in the last 2 months. So what can we do right now? And the answer is there's many things that we need to do. Obviously the business models are hard, but that's where the creativity comes in. But where do good ideas come from? I think for each of us, they come in different places. Maybe some of you are getting some little sparks of ideas now as we have this conversation. So listening, learning, conversing, but also in the shower. Yeah, I agree. I think water is interesting. Like there's something about water. I think it's to do with our isolation in that moment, peace of mind. So shower, even better, waterfall. Probably not easy right now. Swimming. So water-related activities, running, exercise, all that kind of stuff. Nature is the other big thing. But also might be as simple as like a well-timed coffee. or like other kind of stimulants. I'm not encouraging you to all go out and get mushrooms from Epping Forest, but you know, what is it like, the combination of things where you get clear under pressure? Yeah, so innovation, that's not necessarily where you want to be, but sometimes that happens, like accountability and so on. And then if you've got the idea itself, that's not that valuable in terms of building community or impact or business. But if you execute it well, it becomes really valuable. This may be obvious, but it's not always taken on board as we do these things. So we all get excited about ideas, but really by themselves, they're not worth a lot. So if you're trying to put a number against them, it might be like, oh, a brilliant idea in hindsight is worth, you know, £1,000 or a couple of months' work or whatever it is, if you execute it poorly. But a brilliant idea, if you execute it really well, is a world-changing idea. It's a future unicorn, as you say. So but even an average idea, well executed, is worth a lot of money or a lot of impact. So have a think about this. Is like, ideas by themselves are fun, but they're like, they don't do anything by themselves. So you've got to try and do something with them. And also in hindsight, Uber, Airbnb, all these ideas that we're like, wow, what an amazing idea. If we pitch those ideas to each other now, we'd be like, that's a terrible idea. Letting a bunch of people stay in strangers' houses and taking the responsibility for it, putting strangers who haven't got taxi licenses into cars together. These are terrible ideas. These are terrible community building tools. But they've turned out to be successful in different ways, you know, really successful because they've been executed like very, very well. So that's an important lesson when you're thinking about building anything, but especially with community. Okay, my 5 R's, which this is not science. This is just like how I try to package up my learnings and try and apply it. And this is a little toolkit you could apply straight away to your, hopefully to your work. So reason, this is the why, the Simon Sinek, the why are we doing this? What's your purpose? If you've not got a clear goal, or like reason for joining, and it doesn't need to be world changing, it just needs to be clear. Then it's really hard. And I think the more niche and sort of, not unique is the wrong word, but the more focused your reason is, and it can be quite narrow. It doesn't have to be this big broad thing. We want to help people start and finish non-fiction books together. To me, that's still quite broad, but actually to many that feels quite niche. But that's a clear reason to join something, if that's what you're trying to solve for people. So how might you convince friends, colleagues, social networks, like this is something that matters to them? Ritualize. Now, this is the unique bit of the tribe. So we go back to the Fijian island, many, many rituals in that wonderful Polynesian culture that made a real impact on those of us that spent a bit of time there. So what are the rituals? What's unique? What does White Bear do in its team or with its brands that it works with that makes it a unique experience? As well as the lovely people talented people that lead that, what is it? What are the little rituals that make it different? So Rebel Book Club, you know, we have a cocktail every month that's based on the book, or there's a tenuous link between the two. It's a creative, fun little moment, almost away from the content of the book. A ritual does not need to be something that's really important or like different. Think about your favorite TV kind of shows. What are the rituals in those shows? They're like, oh, I love this segment. They almost feel random and like what, but often they will bubble up in your community, or you'll like try something out and it sticks and it gets passed on. It's almost like a meme in your own tribe. On the key pillars of brands original introduced by, oh, there we go. I'm glad there's some like hardcore evidence to back up this point. So what regular unique things might you do together? Don't try and force rituals because they can come across as a bit naff or like contrived, but like what are that you can try things out. And also think about, you know, you can ask your early adopters is like, oh, what should we do together? And like, there just might be something funny that you do. You have this in groups of friends and in families as well. So think about your rituals. They're really important because that's what forms the identity of this little group. And it might make you feel from the outside look a bit weird, but that's okay. If it works for you and it's your kind of like funny little handshake to kick things off, that's great. Now rhythm is slightly different. Rhythm is more around, so we're going back to trust building. So ritual is trust building and a kind of like, we're this weird little group, this is what we do together. Rhythm is more about trust building from a leader's point of view to your group to say, this is what happens in our community. Every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. we run 5K. You turn up, there'll be a 5K course and you'll get a time at the end of it. That is parkrun's rhythm. There is nothing else. And you know that if you sign up to parkrun, that's what you get. And that is brilliant, because there's like, I don't need to worry about organizing that 5K route. I don't need to worry about doing my timing. I just turn up and run, and I stay within the rituals of parkrun. And so that's the beauty of like a good leader of a tribal community will say, this is a newsletter is going out every week, or we'll nudge you once a week about this, or we will meet on the last Tuesday of every month with a cocktail. So it's like that, it takes away that kind of bit of brain space and effort. It's like, what effort is this community or tribe doing that you can just join in with? And you just, because it happens over and over and over again, you're like, okay, the trust is there. I know this happened. So the important thing, if you're setting something up or you're building something, is not to overpromise. So don't say, I'm going to provide 10 opportunities every 24 hours to you, or you're going to have a world-class cocktail every week. Because if you can't deliver that, so keep your promises low, but it is really effective way of building trust, and it holds you to account as well. Respect. This is probably the hardest part of community building, in terms of essentially what are the rules of engagement in your community. But I think it is important to be clear. So again, Rebel Book Club, it's very easy in book reading communities to just use the book as this sort of thing that you like go, oh, I like this, I didn't like this, I like that character, I didn't like the way he said this, I like, because you bond around your criticism of the book and the author because they're distant from you. But that's not particularly helpful. It might help bond our conversation and so on, but it doesn't really help us get value out of this to get real learning. So at Rebel Book Club, our idea is like, less about, let's be critical about the way it's done. We can share that if that's how we feel. But like, what is in here that's interesting? What is in here that's valuable? What is in here that's surprising, that may help us think differently or add something to our lives? So that's a kind of our rule of the road with Rebel Book Club. So what is it in your community that helps people, define the boundaries of how you behave together? And this is really important, because if you don't get this right early on, then the culture evolves into something that maybe you don't want. So there's lots of different ways of doing that, but it's a really important thing to consider. And finally, reward. Okay, this may seem obvious, but I think a lot of people, when they're building communities, don't make this explicit in their communication. Unless I'm a brand or a business, and these are the benefits and rewards of like buying this product or service. A lot of communities builders don't necessarily say, here's what you're going to get from this, because we all need to be rewarded. You're going to feel you're going to be connected to the impact of the work we do by this, this, and this. This is how your money makes a difference. This is what you get for your money. This is what you get for your time. And the rewards might be really fantastic. And think about rewards in terms of features and benefits, a classic business thing of like, if you think about the Pret logo, there are 4 words around the Pret logo. Who can go on, drop them in the chat if you remember the 4 words around the Pret logo? What are they? 2 of them about what it sells, and 2 of them is about the type of thing that sells. So it's coffee. I think the other thing is just food. And then it's organic and natural are the 2 words. So 2, organic coffee, natural food. Thank you, Michael. There we go. In-house Pret master. So we know that coffee is a feature. We know that food is a feature. Good, I can get coffee and food. I'm hungry. I need caffeine. Good, I go there. But it's organic. Well, that's a big statement to make, but that's their promise to you. And it's natural. Whatever that means, that's up to them to communicate to us. But if I'm into that kind of thing, maybe I'll try that out. So those combinations, those two features, 2 benefits, it's really clear. Now, not all of us should go about building our brands and communities by writing our features and benefits in a circle around our logo. In fact, that's a terrible idea. It seems to work with Pret, but it doesn't work for most. But the point is, those things need to be banged home all the time. And depending who you're talking to in what way, you need to double down on your features every month, a non-fiction book, a cocktail, a meetup, all the benefits, read more, learn more, connect more, so that's crucial. What are your rewards? How are you rewarding them? And often in community building, this gets shoved to one side. But remember, people are joining something not just because they're motivated by the reason, but they want to know what they're going to get from it. All right, so those are the 5 R's. not a science, but those are the things that help me. So a way of using these, maybe if you were like, oh, this could be a useful little framework, would be to say, come up with ideas for each of them, for your community, your idea, your business. Share them with someone else. So you've got a few of them, either around the same project or on different projects, and then pick one or two from each to test and do your lean tests on them. And maybe you're really good at some of them already, so pick the ones you're not so good at and try and create more opportunities and ideas around that. And then coming back to the mindset, just to finish, this is just general, so thinking back to the big ideas versus like the small steps. And I think this is so important right now. I love this mantra of keep your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground, because we cannot control, in terms of building our communities, building our businesses, we cannot control. Like, we thought we had control of some stuff before, we've got control of even less stuff now. All we can really control is what we do, what's in front of us in the present, and a little bit into the future, not even much into the future now, a little bit into the future, we can control that. So really, like, what are your feet doing on the ground today? What small steps are you taking? What webinars are you learning from? Who are you connecting with? How are you supporting other people? How are you making sure you're sustainable in all the ways? And then always find time, and maybe this little session is helping with that in some ways, to like dream big, dream of all those post-lockdown things that you're going to go to, the gigs, the parties, the beach. But what is it that you're dreaming about? Like really let yourself go. Like, I want to change how role models are built in out of underprivileged talent in rural West Africa. That's a big dream. So that you want to do that for 20 years? Yes, I do. Cool. Off you go. What's your first step? Raise a bit of money, start, sponsor 3 kids so they can concentrate on their education, their football. So, what is it that you're going to do every day to move yourself a little bit forward as a community? But how do you keep dreaming big? And then the bit in between, business plan from month 3 to year 3, no idea, just respond. But strong vision and clear next step always helps the community. So ask big questions, try new things, and remember to always invite people to join you. I think this is one of the things with community building, sometimes we forget. It's like, that's how you start. You just invite someone to join. If you remember Danny Wallace, who went on to write all sorts of interesting stories, his first ever book was called Join Me. And Join Me, I don't know if anyone read this, this is even pre-MySpace. So Join Me was, he took an ad out in a paper and it said, join me. And it had his postal address. So it's before the internet. And there was no information about what people were joining or why. So it lacked all those things that I've just talked about, but it was just an invitation to join him, whoever he was. And he received a bag full of mail over the next 10 months, and people were like, I'm so excited to join you, Mr. Wallace. What are the plans? How are we doing it? And so what that story shows is that it's human nature to want to be part of something, to belong. Going back to our sort of indigenous tribes related to land, the community, ritual and culture. And so always like that thirst, that need for people to belong is always going to be there. And like, we're all having our ups and downs with this feeling right now as we go through this strange time. So think about like, how do you help people feel like they belong in some way? And don't abuse that. And I don't mean that we would do that deliberately, but it's very easy to like use, tribe wash, for want of a better phrase, like community building, which we've seen happen with brands and organizations. And it's, you can smell that from a mile off. So think about inviting people to join, but then what are they joining? Why are they joining? And how are you going to make them, how are you going to help them achieve the goal with you? There are lots more tricky questions around the business side and like so on, but I think being transparent in terms of building trust up front, like, this is a business, we make money, you're joining, these are the benefits you're going to get, and this is the part you can play, always helps. Anyway, so that's a little summary. I've probably gone on way too long. I've covered most of the time we've got together, but hopefully that's been helpful. Are there any other quick questions, Kelly, or anyone else that I can help with?
Well, firstly, Ben, that was really, really amazing. I'm feeling super inspired, so thank you so much. I have a bit of a personal one, because we're new to building tribes per se. We're a creative agency, and now we've built a future unicorn tribe. And we built it because we were getting phone calls from startups saying, oh, their investment's been paused, or where do they get investment, or this has now happened and they're having to pivot. And we just saw all these similarities and challenges that startups were having. And we thought, well, why don't we let them talk to each other and help share resources? And we started this Slack group. So now we've over 100 members on there. And now we're a bit like, what? How do we increase engagement? What do we do now? We just did this because we saw a need for it. And we want to increase engagement. Is there any tips on getting people to engage with each other so it's not as reliant, I guess, on us as much? Because we obviously a huge amount of the value is through people talking to each other.
Yeah,
not us
so there's so
people.
much here, isn't there?
Yeah.
So there's one question, which is why do you want them to engage, which you could then you could ask, like, but why do you want to do that? So you could go down the philosophical kind of like, get to the root cause of that. Is it purely to get new clients? Is it really around something else? But beyond that, it's around like, how do you empower them to connect? So if there's a shared, and this is why the shared purpose is so important, because if we're all in this together beyond a useful, like this morning, this is hopefully valuable in one way or another. But in terms of this, and the chat's great, but in terms of turning this into a purpose thing, it's like, right, okay, now we're all going to meet back in a week on the Slack channel or on another version of this webinar, and you're all going to do the 5 hours, and then we're going to come back and we're going to share them all in this space, and then people can feed back to each other, and then, you know, so that's obviously moving to more of an educational community. But it's kind of like, what's the purpose? And if you can be clear about that, like, we're all trying to help each other make more money in our business, or try different business models, or get better at our brand communication thing. It's like, once you're clear about what that is, then you can say, here's, and then you get into the rhythm and the ritual. So then it's like, okay, we're going to meet back here. We're going to share this. For the first 5 people that respond, we're going to give this time, but we're going to do it, you know. One thing is like doing it, showing how you're doing things. So it might be that, say, Kelly, you say to me, oh, Ben, can we help you with Rebel Book Club's campaign here? But instead of us doing it privately, we might do it, you might record the session and share it with the group, or you might get the group to contribute into that. And so there's a sense of like, we're doing this together, although you're guiding. So it comes back to the purpose, it comes back to why we're all there, and then it's about how can we enable people to participate in that. But I think what's important is you don't want to be asking questions like, how should we do this to the group? You want to be saying, this is what we're doing, this is how you can participate, and then you know, you set the boundaries, and then off we go.
That's brilliant.
So Manny is asking, manage without ruining the motivation, and I can't see quite to the end of it, and good within a group. How can you build a tribe whilst managing extra difficult personal? Yes. So this is a question that every leader has faced in history. I mean, look at politics, right? It's messy. Human beings are complicated. This is why the structure is so important. It's so important to get clear about why it is and why it isn't. You can imagine with the island project in Fiji, oh my God, we had so many, you know, what happens when an internet chat room of people who wants to go to a desert island comes to life, real life on the beach? That's why we had TV crews interested in this, because it was like such a social experiment. And the answer is, it's complicated. You know, we had, in that first group of early adopters who turned up on the beach, we had like, it was like a reality TV show, except it was real. You know, we had the alcoholic, the online gaming person who was escaping. We had like someone who just had a sex change and wanted to go to their next kind of Burning Man event and show off like their new life. And so we had all these interesting characters who brought their baggage and life with them. And then we had a bunch of sort of quite grounded, more sort of stereotype backpackers, and it's messy. And so that's why you need to have very clear guidelines from the start. When someone bubbles up as a strong character, it's harder in a small group. So that's why if you have 10 of you in your team and you've got one strong character, they tend to dominate, right? And so you need to be able to say, these are the boundaries. That's why your rules of the road need to be really clear from the beginning, and they need to be stronger or more clear the deeper the work that you're doing together, or the deeper the sort of like engagement. So if you're running a full education program, lots of rules of the road, or very clear rules of the road. If you're running a book club like us, maybe a couple, because it's quite a light interaction. But yeah, that would be my advice. And also, you need energy. This is the community building path is not always the easiest one, but it is the most fulfilling and the most fun.
Are there any other questions for Ben before we wrap up? I don't want to cut anyone's opportunity to ask. Feel free to blurt out or put it in the chat, but other than that, then I think it's time to wrap up. I don't want to keep people too long. Thank you guys so much for joining our Future Unicorn session today, and thank you so much, Ben. That was, like Kelly said, it was actually really inspiring, and I'm ready to go fix and build this community that we're currently doing, so I'm super pumped up for that. We'd love to hear how everyone thought it went, and I'm also going to be sharing our COVID-19 brand planning toolkit with everyone here as well, so watch your inbox for that. And if you haven't already, you're definitely welcome to join our Future Unicorn Slack community. Just share your challenges with brands similar to yours, spitball ideas together, and you can join via the link that I'm about to share. But that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ori. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's been a pleasure.